Hello and welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, the Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops, a former D1 hooper and current teacher, husband, and father of 3 amazing kids.
And I'm Omari Sankofa II, Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press.
And of course, we're always blessed to be joined by our producer, Wes Davenport. If you are not listening to him and Blake Silverman on the Pin Down over on the Detroit Bad Boys YouTube channel, you absolutely should be. You should be reading Omari Sankofa II on the Detroit Free Press. But guys, we got to get right into it today. We have friend of the podcast. This is always my favorite thing to say. You guys know him. He's the cap guru. He's overtaking the NBA draft world this year, which I absolutely love because now him and I get to talk about it from the front office show, from Spot Track. Our guy, Keith Smith. Keith, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, man. I appreciate all that, but overtaking the draft world's going like about 25 bridges too far. I'm just a little more grounded than usual this year.
Nah, I love that you jumped in though, Keith. Are you having fun?
Yeah.
I went on The Athletic on Slam and Jam the other day, and they were like, it kind of hit me because they brought up how I do NBA and NBA draft, and so like now you're kind of in this world as well. It's not easy to keep up on both things.
Yeah, it's really hard. And because of what I do over at Spot Track with roster stuff and free agents, I'm also trying to keep up on the G League and some of the like major overseas players as well, which it gets kind of tied into the draft work quite a bit there. But yeah, it was a really fun year. I mean, it helped. This is such a loaded draft class with all kinds of really good prospects, pretty deep into it. So I had a lot of fun with it. Yeah, it's been fun. It is a lot of work though, but I turned my hobby into my job, so I'm not complaining by any means.
Keith, how do things change for you? One, I want to apologize to your Boston Celtics. I wanted to apologize before I asked my question, just to get that out of the way. But how do things adjust once you get from sort of playoffs to off season? Are you able to carve out a little bit more time to watch TV or do this and that, or is it just you go? Especially with draft stuff now, I would assume that probably absorbs some of that, huh?
Yeah, I took the couple of nights without games that we had in between the second round and the conference finals, and we did like catch up on a little bit of TV and a little bit of binge watching. I try when I say in season, I mean like through free agency, really through summer league. I try to keep that to like mindless TV. That's just complete like garbage stuff, like Below Deck and things like that. That's just awful television, but just it's fun for an hour or so, and then like things I really want to enjoy, then we'll lock in. Bryce knows this. I don't know if you know this, Omari. I'm a huge Marvel guy. So I do make sure I take time to go, watch any of the new Marvel stuff that comes out. So that I do carve out time for, but yeah, it's good. But yeah, there's a lot to catch up on. I'm thankfully normally at this time of year, like I am crash coursing the draft, like just trying to learn as many guys as I can, so I have some idea when I have to talk and write about these guys while doing off-season previews for teams and then free agents and then extension talk and reacting to whatever news is out there, and of course watching what should be the best basketball of the season in the NBA around all that. But it works out kind of okay now when there's only one game a night. Like that makes it a lot easier.
Wes asked, and MC313, Thunderbolts, was it good? And MCC says, has Marvel on the come up? So Wes wants to know if it's worth seeing, Keith.
I really enjoyed it. I am not the best person to ask, because even the bad Marvel stuff that nobody else likes, I enjoy. But I like to go to movies where I don't have to think while I'm there. Like I want to turn my brain off. I want to watch superheroes punch bad guys in the face and blow things up and crazy stuff that could hopefully never really happen go on, and I have a lot of fun with that. So but yeah, it was good though. I will say for a lot of the recent Marvel fare, it was really good. It had a lot of heart. It was pretty funny throughout too, which helped quite a bit, and it's got some good story behind it.
But the most important question is, because over on the front office show, the Celtics versus Lakers has the potential of breaking up Keith Smith and Trevor Lane. On the Pistons Pulse, your thoughts on the lawn care at your house is the question that could potentially tear this show apart between me and O2. So, Keith, Chili asked, how is your lawn?
lawn's looking good. We're finally getting some rain here in Central Florida, so it was good. The other day I literally stepped out onto our back patio, and I was looking at the backyard after a rainstorm, and it had been cut earlier in the day.
Oh,
And I was like,
best.
man, lawn's looking good. And my daughter goes, "That's the most dad thing you've ever said." Like
Y-
she was just disgusted and walked away and had enough of that. But yeah, I mean, it's looking pretty good right now. But full disclosure, hand up, I don't cut my own lawn anymore. There's too many things going on with our daughter, with soccer and all the stuff she's involved in. We have a guy in the neighborhood who does it, and it's a chance to support a small business owner who's trying to make some stuff work, and we are happy to have him do that.
Don't smile at that comment, O2. I saw the little smirk over there that you thought you were getting Keith on your side. Get out of here with that.
Because this is when the combo started, I was like, dang, I don't have anything to add to the live conversation. But then Keith said basically what my strategy is for when I do become a lawn, I don't want to say lawn owner. Like, I'm just gonna have a lawn in front of my or whatever. I'm gonna have somebody else do it. Like, I'm not gonna bother with it. So so Keith was like on your side, and he kind of came back around and boomeranged back to how I aligned on it. So thank you, Keith.
I will say I used to love cutting the grass because it's just a mindless task where there's an immediate gratification after you finish it. So I did love it, but it's too much. It's too hot here too. If you're going to do it yourself, like you got to get up really early in the morning and be that person who upsets all the neighbors, or you're out there doing it late at night. Cause I mean, it's already in the 90s here today, and that's just nonsense. So I'm happy to pay to have the neighbor do it and help him with his business.
All right, Keith, let's talk about Pistons. And I want to set the stage for us in this conversation. We're obviously going to talk about the offseason, but we need to set the stage because maybe some of your perspective will be based on that. What did you think Cade Cunningham looked like this year? What do you think J.I. looks like? What do you think of Asar Thompson, Jalen Duren, et cetera? Because we will talk about contract extensions and offseason moves and second options and all of that. So let's start here and then we'll see how much we need to get into it. What was your overarching thought on the Pistons season, the run into the playoffs, and where things stand based off of that?
Yeah, I went into the season, I think we even might have talked last summer where it was looking to take a step forward. They didn't. They took like a giant leap forward, right? It was incredible to watch them really come out of the gate strong and then just play well all the way through, including the playoffs. So that was so fun because there was a part of me that was, all right, when is this going to fall off, right? Well, when is this going to they're going to be a 500 team or below? And it never ended up happening, which is really, really good. And I think last year's off season was very, to some, I think initially was a little underwhelming. Whereas like, all right, but none of these guys are a star. None of these guys are gonna, lift. But it turned out to be the sum of the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, right? Like it was just so good, there is or a whole is greater than the sum of the parts. I think I butchered that quote. But that's what it was, right? Malik Beasley fit in great. Tobias Harris gave them a lot, even sometimes when it didn't look like it statistically. Like he was the guy who was regularly, you could see, putting an arm around Jalen Duren's shoulders, putting an arm around Cade Cunningham, and like, hey, here's what we need to do. Like it's okay. Like we're gonna get there, and that's where he's at in his career. And then even the Tim Hardaway Jr. acquisition was pretty solid. Anytime you can get a guy in what was essentially a salary dump from the other side, but then they start 70+ games for you is pretty good. So I thought, it all really came together quite well for this team. And then the playoffs always tell us a lot, right? They tell us, what do you need if that's the world you want to live in, if that's where you want to be. And I think now it's for the Pistons is, how do we take the next step, right? Going from bad team to good team is one thing. Going from good team to contender is a whole different step. And it's quite frankly a lot harder of a step to make. Teams often come up, then they kind of stagnate or they don't ever really fully get there. And then they kind of disappear. And then we're spent a couple of years later looking around like, man, this team never really kind of got there, huh? We thought they were going to be there. But yeah, I thought this was an awesome season for the Pistons.
Keith, this is the eternal debate for any team that gets to this point. Do you go ahead and, cash in the assets you got and try to really go for it, or do you slow play it a little bit, see how guys develop? And obviously both teams probably find like a middle ground. between those two. But like, let's just broadly, you're in the driver's seat for this team. Do you sense that opportunity, or are you more so, I want to see what this team looks like in another year before I go that route?
Yeah, I think the single hardest thing for an NBA, I'll say general manager, because all the titles are all crazy now, but lead decision maker is when to go for it, right? If you wait too long, you waited too long, you maybe missed your window never came. If you go too early, maybe your young guys aren't quite ready to make that jump, and now all of a sudden it's you don't ever get there because you went too early. Finding that right timing when to go for it is huge. I think in Detroit's case, I would not. This is very dependent on who they could get, right? If it was Kevin Durant and go all in to go get Kevin Durant, I probably don't do that because that's probably going to be a 1 or 2 year kind of move. If it was all in to go get a guy who's 25 years old, 100%, let's go. Like get that guy and let's move this thing forward. With somebody that can grow with Cunningham and Duran and the other kids on the roster, and we're going to have this guy for the next 5 years or so. That absolutely, but who's that going to be? That we don't know. But I think it's okay to let's try to run it back with upgrading some spots. And I think what's important now for them is they're playing in a different world in terms of free agency goes. Not necessarily like let's go add a max guy or anything like that. One, there's not a player to add like that this summer in free agency. They're not going to have that kind of cap space anyway. But you're in a spot where it's we need a 10th man off the bench. We need a combo big. Now a combo big's not looking at the Pistons and be like, to win 20 games, I'm out. Like for the minimum, no. But if it is, I'm going to take the minimum and go there and be a part of a playoff team and be a rotation guy, sign me up and go. And that's huge. I mean, those are things that don't get thought about a lot, but you're playing in a different world than you have been in years past. And I think that's huge for Detroit.
Before we get to some of those names, and probably even before that, before we have you break down their cap situation, because they are in a unique situation where over the cap, under the cap, what does that mean? What are their availability to do those different things, etc. And so it'll be fun to have you break that down for us. A large part of that is Cade Cunningham. And so I want to get your quick thoughts on Cade, and then we'll get into the offseason, the cap situation, and all of that. But, I mean, what did you think about Cade in his season? Obviously ended up third team, All-NBA, impressive playoff run outside of a couple numbers, the turnovers and three-point percentage. But what were your thoughts on Cade's leap this season and why he may be enticing for people to come play with?
Yeah, so one, extremely unselfish superstar. Everybody wants to play with guys like that, right? Like we're seeing it with Tyrese Halliburton. Indiana, much like Detroit, never really been like the marquee free agent destination. But guys will go there, whether it's through free agency or trades, because they want to play with guys that are unselfish stars, that are just as happy to set other guys up and can do that, but can also take games over on their own. I think the single biggest thing for Cade Cunningham, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, is he was far more efficient this year, and he was far more efficient because he had a lot better help around him, a lot better spacing. I talked about it a lot, is you saw – not last season, but in the prior seasons with him, he would have these moments where it'd be, all right, I'm going to make the right read 4 times in a row. Guy clanks the jump shot. So now on the 5th, 6th, 10th, 7th, 12th time, whatever, I'm going to take a contested fall away mid-ranger myself because why not? I have just as good a chance as making it as the dude who's missing the open jumper I created for him. And that's where you get, when they go in, it looks awesome, and we all get fired up, and those make highlights, and everybody gets there, but more often than not, they miss, and it's like, man, this dude's really inefficient. Well, now with proper spacing, better playmakers around him, guys who can make the game easier for him instead of him just making the game easier for them, huge, and his efficiency skyrocketed, and I think that's big. I think he also took a meaningful step forward defensively. I think he was a more serious defender this year. I don't think we're ever going to see Cade Cunningham on an all-defense team. Part of it is that he carries too much of an offensive load, and part of it is it's not what he does. But when you can go from being a negative to at least a neutral, that's huge because you build out the right guys. And I think he was probably even above neutral on that, slightly above average as a defender because he has good size. I think their lineup constructions by the coaching staff were really good because they put him in positions where it wasn't always having to defend really quick point guards or defend guys who are 2 inches taller with 40 pounds on him. Like they put him in spots where he could kind of defend guys that made a lot more sense. So I'm really excited about where he's going with the team. And I think they're really excited too. It's funny because I'll talk the contract briefly with him. This is where it's really hard for a front office, and no one would ever admit this on the record. But like, there's part of them that are like, did we really have to have him on the All NBA team? Right? Like, not to save money because they're trying to be cheap, but man, that would have created a lot more cap flexibility for us. But on the flip side, you're like, yeah, we're happy for the player, and we go there. And if you're really worried about it, don't sign him to the contract that has the language. So they obviously knew as a factor. And I think in the end, it'll be, hey, the massive step forward he took, going to the playoffs, everything that's going on with our team now, we're okay with that over the $8 million more we got to pay him in starting salary.
Real quick, Omar, like that's my thing is like, at the end of the day, is it really that bad? Whenever Cade got it, I was like, okay, well, either he's not going to get it, or if he gets it, you feel great because now that means he's a, all NBA level player. So it is, I understand. I'll have to ask you, I'll have to text you offline about because we've thrown around some ideas of like, does that not actually hit the salary cap on that? And some of those different things whenever it's homegrown drafted talent.
Yeah.
But we'll talk some other time. O2, what do you got for Keith now as we move into the offseason?
Yeah. Just looking obviously at the cap bump. So I think it added $45 billion to his deal, and then it was essentially the same as what Evan Mobley got.
Same as Evan Mobley. Yep.
Indeed. Does that, I guess broadly, does that change things significantly for this team? Like, I think that adds like an extra maybe $8-9 billion. Like, that's enough to get somebody, right? Just how much does that change things?
Yeah, it changes it a decent chunk. So when you look at it, I'm just gonna simplify it and call it $8 million more.
Yeah,
that it added to the books. So if you had kept it where it was, they would have been able to create cap space in the range of, it gets a little wonky, but let's call it about 22-ish, or I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong number, about 24 to 25 million. If they kind of cleared the decks of everything that they could. Now that number changes to about 17 million. It's about 16.9. So that changes the math, right? When you're at 24 million, you could say, all right, that can maybe get us 2 players. Re-signed Michael Beasley or not Michael Beasley. God, that'd be a problem. That'd be the old Pistons, right? Re-signed Malik Beasley, and then another guy, right? If we had 24, 25 million to play with. Now in this world, it is 17 million, and that's probably more. All right, that's probably Beasley re-signed if they go this direction. They don't have to go the cap space direction, but if they do, all right, that gets us a re-signed Beasley, and then maybe we have a little bit left over to go get somebody else and kind of, hey, we can offer you slightly more than the minimum, right? And we can do a deal, out of cap space and kind of go this direction. And that's what it changed fundamentally for them. I don't think it's not like it was, man, we're in the mix to sign this all-star who's available in free agency. Again, those guys aren't available this summer. And it didn't change it that way. It just changed it in it. Now your paths are probably a little more, the 2 paths you could go are a lot more closer with a lot better arguments to know which way should we move on this versus if it was, man, we could create all this cap space. This is probably the way to go.
Okay. If you're watching live, thank you. Hit the like button, subscribe, all of that. We appreciate you. Obviously, if you're listening after the fact, we appreciate you as well. Share, continue to listen and support. We see all of your questions in the comments. We appreciate you. We will throw those up on the screen as we get into things, or we'll throw them to Keith at the end of the episode. I want to go to a short break, and then when we come back, Keith, I would like for you to please outline both directions, right? Because we just talked about cap space, but I think we need to make sure everybody understands how we get to cap space with this team and what that means in terms of bird rights and availability to sign guys to number and all of that. And after you outline that for us, then have you outline what over the cap means and what is available on that side of things. So we're going to go to a short break. When we come back, we'll have Keith outline both sides of that right after this.
All right, we are back with segment 2. Keith, I think some fans understand this. Obviously, the cap rules could get a little confusing, but you're talking about if a team could be over the cap or under the cap, and how cap holds work and all that. So, long story short, Pistons have 2 paths they could pursue here. Could you just give us an overview of both paths and sort of what the implications of both would be?
Yeah, so unlike prior years where it was, hey, we're gonna get rid of everything we can and we're gonna have $50 million in cap space or whatever it worked out to. It's not that way this year. We talked about it, and it's not all Cade Cunningham's bump up in the extension. There's just they signed other guys in years past. They've drafted guys with high picks and the like. So now we're in a position where if they go the cap space route, the ways to start thinking about this are if you're going to do that, the common thought process would be you clear the decks of anything that is not guaranteed salary. And there are ways you could create even more if you were to waive and stretch a guy and the like. And I just don't think that's going to be a thing for the Pistons. It just doesn't make sense. They don't have anybody in a position to really do that with. So if we go the clear the deck route, that means all free agent cap holds, we're renouncing all of them to create the maximum amount of cap space we have. Because here's what happens is if you even keep 1 or 2 of the bigger cap holds, you can't create cap space. You're going to be an over the cap team. That's just where we're working with. So you clear the decks. That gets you to $16.9 million in projected cap space. And I'll say this too. I should have said this off the jump. That's working off the assumption the cap goes up to 10%. We all pretty much think it will this year with the new media rights deal kicking in. So $16.9 million in cap space. So now you're down to the handful of guys you have under contract. So that is, let me see, that's 10 players under contract. And now you have just call it 17 million in cap space. And in addition, you would have the room exception, which projects to be about 8.8 million for this upcoming offseason. So you got 17 million in cap space to spend, 8.8 million. You've got 5 roster spots to fill. You're obviously miles away from the apron and all that stuff. So that's not even a concern, nor is the luxury tax. So now that becomes, which these are the conversations that are being had right now. And somebody will raise their hand and be like, wait a minute, you can't talk to free agents until a day after the NBA finals. Yeah. Okay. We're all grown-ups here. They're talking right now. And part of what Trajan Langdon and staff are doing is, all right, Malik Beasley, how much do you need to stay here? Do you need 15 million, 16 million? Do you need all 16.9 million of our cap space? If you do, and we agree that that's fair value and we're good, you re-sign them using the cap space, go forward with that. You do up to a 4-year deal if you want, but that's for them to figure out and sort through. If it becomes, okay, and then you still, before I move on to the next, then you have the 8.8 million to use in the room exception to sign other guys. And you could break the room exception up. You could do 4 million players or whatever. Generally, it's probably going to go to one guy. Now, here's your issue, right? Now you have, well, what about Dennis Schroeder? And part of the negotiation there is, all right, hey, Beasley needs the 16.9 million. Will you take the 8.8? If you'll take the 8.8, we got the 2 guys back. Now we're filling out the rest of the roster with minimums, but we feel kind of okay about that. We feel like we can do that because we've got 12 guys under contract. We've only got a few roster spots. Let's go. The other path, do you want me to move on to the other path?
Well, I was just going to ask real quick, Keith. Is there any reason to go under the cap if they're just going to sign their own guys? Like in the scenario you just outlined, okay, you brought back Beasley, you brought back Schroeder, you lose Tim Hardaway Jr. Okay, we can all live with that because Jaden Ivey's going to be healthy and all of that. Is there a benefit to doing that as opposed to staying over the cap and re-signing them with the MLE and bird rights and stuff like that? Is there any benefit to going under the cap to sign their own guys?
It's a great question. In a lot of cases, no. In this specific case, because of Malik Beasley, yes.
Okay.
Because with Malik Beasley, the Pistons only have non-bird rights on him because he signed the 1 year, I think it was $6 million, right? 1 year, $6 million contract for him. Now, this is where I kind of caution folks. We all get excited. We jump up and down and get fired up when a team signs a player to a really team-friendly contract. But then when the player can't be re-signed or extended off that contract, it kind of becomes a little bit of a problem. So in this case for the Pistons, 1 year, $6 million. I mean, you could argue, and I'm not going to fight you very much, that might have been the best value contract in the NBA last year. Now it sucks though, because you only have non-bird rights, which means you're very limited in what you can give him on a raise in his salary. And when you can only give him a minimum type, or not a minimum, because I don't want to say it's a minimum deal, but a very small bump in salary, it's probably not going to be enough, because what you're competing against, the Brooklyn Nets probably aren't going to sign Malik Beasley. They're just not in that kind of spot right now, right? They're rebuilding. Doesn't make sense for them to sign a guy like him. But every other team that has the non-taxpayer MLE, which projects to be worth about $14.1 million, they can use that whole thing. They're like, hell yeah, we'd have Malik Beasley come in and fill the exact same role he filled for Detroit. But for us, at $14.1 million, that's why his non-bird rights aren't enough to re-sign him off of. If he had been on a 1 year, $20 million contract, you just say, we'll stay over the cap, we'll re-sign him because that's probably enough. Even if it had been 12 or 15 million. And I'm not playing revisionist history and ripping the front office or anything, because he probably wasn't worth signing for more than $6 million last year. But that's where it can kind of become a little bit of an issue. It sounds awesome up front, right? We're all fired up. Man, we got this dude for $6 million. This is great. And enabled us to do these other 5 things we did. But then when it comes time to re-signing a guy, it gets real messy. So that's why if Beasley needs more than the non-taxpayer MLE, you probably need to go under the cap, wipe things clear, re-sign him, then you figure out the rest of it from there.
Keith, to follow up on that, so what teams realistically have the means to offer more than that 14.1 million MLE? Is that a significant market, or is it really just a handful of teams that could make the Pistons blink?
And real quick, and how many teams are going to have the non-tax MLE, Keith, as well? Because that's essentially the teams that are competing for Beasley, right? That Pistons fans may be nervous about.
Yeah. Cap space teams is just Brooklyn. That one's the easy one. Detroit, we're talking about them. The only other team that could go the cap space route, and it's a little wonky, is Memphis. And if they did it, it would be only enough to allow them to renegotiate and extend Jaren Jackson Jr.
I was going to say Jaren not making all NBA kind of put a hamper in that, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it makes things a little messy for the Grizzlies, but it's not enough to be. They would only do it to do that.
Yes.
They would not go that route to do anything else. So from there, you're talking non-taxpayer teams. So now you're talking, hey, it's probably somewhere around 12 to 15 teams, depending how things go. But you're talking teams like Atlanta. I'm going to take the bad teams out of the mix because that's probably not what Beasley wants to do per se. But then you're Houston. Like, clearly, he'd fill a huge need for them. The Clippers could have that available to them this summer. It's a little weird because it's one of his former teams, but the Bucks could be in that position. Oklahoma City, it's crazy as that is. They could be there. Probably not, but they could be. Philly could be in position to do some stuff. That's very dependent on what happens with Quentin Grimes. Sacramento, San Antonio, who could clearly have a need. And then you're getting into like Utah, Washington, Charlotte, Portland, like teams that probably aren't going to be real appetizing for Beasley to go to. But definitely some teams I think you'd at least have your eyes on them as a suitor for Malik Beasley.
Okay, before we get to the JI and JD extensions, which is I think probably the most important decisions that are coming for Trajan this summer.
We didn't do the other path, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
wanna
yeah,
do that?
yeah.
Okay.
Let's do the other path real fast
Okay,
in terms
perfect.
of we outlined the under the cap. Now, I think a lot of people assume they are going to go over the cap, so a lot of questions come with that. What can guys sign for? Why is that probably the way they're leaning? What do they have access to, etc.
Yeah, you stay over the cap, everything's just easier to do this summer with everybody except for Beasley. But if Beasley says, hey, 14 million bucks out of the non-tax MLE, that is enough for me. Or, obviously you take less if he doesn't even want the whole amount. I don't know why he wouldn't at this point. But if it was, hey, I'll take that, done, you get that. Now that was your big signing exception. You do trigger a first apron hard cap, but again, they're far enough away, not the end of the world. They'll be able to, should still stay well under that. But then guys like Dennis Schroeder and Tim Hardaway Jr. and those guys, now what you do is you turn around and you use their bird rights to sign guys like that in free agency. Because what you can do with those guys is, all right, Schroeder, you only have early bird, but that's more than enough to give him a raise off of the 13 million he made last year. And you go Hardaway, you have his full bird rights. You could probably, offer him significantly less than the six. It's kind of funny when I've been thinking about this. If you could almost flip him and Beasley from a year ago, right? Where Beasley makes, 16-ish million, 14 to 16 million, and Hardaway makes 6, you probably feel pretty good about that. Then you get into the options become with a couple other guys, because now you have guys like Lindy Waters, Paul Reed. Where do you want to go with those guys? Those are end of the bench kind of guys. But you're just a little bit easier if Beasley says, yeah, non-taxpayer is good enough for me, I'm good, to then re-sign Schroeder and Hardaway and give yourself a little bit more play. You still are probably in the kind of the same boat because Schroeder, if you go under the cap, your cap space is going to go to Beasley, then is 8.8 enough for Schroeder? And if it isn't, now you're sorry, well, who's next? The good news is point guard free agent class is fairly deep in like backup level point guards that are good. So you could probably make it work. But if you really want to run it back, that's the way you do it, is you stay over the cap, re-sign Beasley using non-tax, bird rights on the other guys, and move forward filling out your roster with the rest of the way you need to.
Okay, before we get to we'll get to some of the questions, because there's a lot of good questions that will drive conversation. Again, I think the biggest conversations this offseason are the JI and JD extensions. So, Keith, start with whichever one you want and whatever numbers you think, because I know me and O2 have had these conversations. We're similar, maybe a little bit different in what we think, but we'll definitely be fascinated to hear where your value on those guys is.
Yeah, I think Duren's the easier one, because we've seen him play, more recently. We've seen what he's become. I think he took massive steps forward as a defensive player last season. I think he was a lot better. He's clearly got great pick and roll chemistry with Cade. He's become a really good finisher, and there's a chance if you told me he won a couple rebounding titles, I'm not going to argue with you. I think he could. Do that as well. And we're even seeing his offensive game round out a little bit. He's starting to see a lot more passes as a role man that he didn't see before or didn't feel comfortable attempting. And he's really softened up his touch about 10, 12, maybe even 15 feet. I don't know that he ever becomes a true jump shooting big man or starts taking threes on any kind of regular basis, but at least now it is, if he catches it, he's got a nice little shot he can knock down without having to be directly at the rim. So you add all that up, plus his age, because he's still super young. You add all that up, and it becomes, all right, where are we going with this? And I think kind of a good comparison point when he was at a similar point in his career was Jarrett Allen, because a lot of similarities there. I think Allen was a better defensive player than Duren was at the same age, but I think Duren's more advanced offensively, especially as a passer. Allen's developed more as a passer in the last couple of years. But I think what you're looking at there is, all right, he's not getting a max deal. Take that off the table. That shouldn't even be a thing. But can we get him at, the price in inflation and the cap going up and all that. Can we get him at 25 to 28 million? Average annual value, AAV? Sure, let's go. like then we can kind of go from there. And I think that's about where I would be, is a contract that averages somewhere in the 25 to 28 million range.
Just to follow up on that, you look at what Houston did with Şengün and Jalen Green, and I bring that up just to get into years where I think Green was like 3 years, 106, Şengün was 5. Would you go for a 5 with Duren? Like, do you think there may be some give and take as far as like we could pay you more but fewer years, or more years but we do this? Do you see more flexibility in that regard, especially now too with the way cap numbers have gone up, and a lot more guys probably are less keen to even pursue a max type deal?
Yeah, if I'm not giving him a full max, I definitely want him on 5 years. So if you can get a player on a 5-year deal that's a value deal, let's go. Like Jalen Johnson with the Hawks, $30 million a year, and the way they structured it was $30 million flat. That's how I would even look to do it with Duren. If we're going to give him $28 million a year, I'd give him $28 million flat. Give him a little bit more in the first couple of years when the payroll overall for the Pistons is still lower. And then as the cap goes up and other guys are going to get paid too, because it sounds crazy to say it, but you have to think about, what are we going to pay Thompson, right? You have to already be building that into your plans. If we're going to get in there, I want him at a number that I know what the number is, right? It's not growing. The cap should outgrow the contracts for at least probably 2, maybe 3 years. But if I can have him at 28 million flat versus jumping up where it starts out at 22 million-ish and finishes at 32, 33, 34 million, I'd rather have him flat and then have it, because that's going to pay off for me better in the long run, especially with Cade already on a max. So that's what I would be looking at with him. Ivy's a little trickier. In general, a little harder to get to a number, because when I look in just full disclosure, I'm writing my rookie scale extension piece. Like I'm outlining it, putting in their thoughts as I get into stuff. When I think about Jaden Ivey, I feel like we have a pretty good book on what he is. Then other times I'm like, but we just didn't see him for a half a season when the team played really good basketball. And I'm by no means saying Jaden Ivey was the problem. That's why the Pistons were good, because he wasn't around, because that's not the case at all. I just think it's a little harder, because what you're looking at, if you're the Pistons, is what is his role? Is he going to be a 6-man combo guard off the bench? Is he going to be starting guard next to Cade Cunningham? The nice thing with Cunningham's versatility is you can start a lot of different kind of guys next to him, and that'll work. And that really depends. If the Pistons are more, we think he's a starting level guy and think he can be there, I'm going to price in a little bit of all right, we got to see it a little bit more. And I'm probably going to go a little lower on his number than I would with Duren, because we just saw it for a full season with Duren. But with Ivy, I'd say, all right, we got to kind of go a little bit lower here. I'm probably going to say something in the 18 to 20 million AAV range for him. And that's the number where a lot of guys will say, you know what, I'm going to bet on myself. I'll carry this over to the summer of 2026. And the good news for the Pistons is you make him a restricted free agent. You still have control. You still offer him the exact same thing. And that's probably what I would be looking to do a little bit more so.
The other thing I always bring up with Duren is the center market in general in the NBA is so fascinating right now, Keith, because like I've said it before, if I'm Jalen Duren, I'm saying I'm better than Nick Claxton, who's like at 25 a year or something. Yeah. And if I'm the Pistons, I'm saying, yeah, but you're not better than Ivica Zubac, who's at like 20 million a year right now. And so like that center with J.I., would you consider, O2 brought up the Houston Rockets with Jalen Green. With J.I., would you consider maybe a shorter term deal then, like what the Rockets did with Jalen Green, or no, like you would just kind of keep the number there and then maybe play it out if he doesn't accept it?
Yeah, the Jalen Green one was so unique. We haven't seen a rookie scale extension like that paid a guy near max money, but on such a short-term window. And I think that was the Rockets and Green kind of coming to middle ground, where it was, we don't want to give you the max. Then he was like, well, then let's take it to free agency and we'll see where it goes from there. And then I think for Green's side, it was, all right, well, if you're not going to give me the max, still give me a lot, but let me get out of this deal early. You could do a modified version of that. certainly with Ivy for a lot less money, because you can't give him 30 plus million. Like that just would be that's he just hasn't proven that yet. But yeah, if you did that where if he was like, hey, I'll do 20, but I only want to do it for 2 years or 3 years, that's going to be a tougher conversation in the front office to say, man, we got to figure this out. And I think he would be more likely to say, you know what, then just let me play it out. Like, let's play it out. I'll have a healthy year. I'll go out there. I'll kick butt, and then you can re-sign me. Moving forward with that. I think that's how that would go down.
Real quick before we go to break, and then we'll get to the questions coming out of that. Walk us through what restricted free agency would look like if one or both of these guys got there next. So, like the cap or the qualifying offer, the offer sheets, like what does restricted free agent, you can just take one and play it out, but it would be similar for both. What does that look like for these players?
Yeah. So how that works is next year they play out the contracts they're currently on. Then when we get into the summer 2026, you do a process. You tender them both qualifying offers. Qualifying offer is a 1-year contract offer it's a set amount based off where they're drafted. Duran's would be 8.9 million. Ivy's would be 13.4 million, assuming they both meet starter criteria. There's other factors, but let's just keep them the simple numbers for now. Then what that does is, if the players, let's say Ivy was like, you know what, I'm not getting any offers in free agency. Can't work out a long-term deal with the Pistons. I'll just sign for 13.4 million for 1 year. I'll come back, I'll play, and then I'll be an unrestricted free agent the year after. But why you give them a qualifying offer is that allows them to be restricted free agents. Then you have control over the process, because then it takes a team giving them an offer. They have to do what's called an offer sheet, which is sign the player to an offer sheet, and then they give the incumbent team, in this case the Pistons, they get a day to decide if they're going to match that or not. It used to be, people always think about how it used to be 3 days. When I first started doing this, it was 7 days.
Oh, wow.
And it was like crazy how much.
Because it ties up their cap space, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it ties up cap space, ties the player up too. Essentially, you're tying up two teams and a player, and then probably 7 or 8 other players who are waiting on other things. And it was crazy. And teams were doing silly stuff like, hey, we doing an offer sheet, and then they're hiding at Las Vegas Summer League. Or it's like, hey, they're walking across the gym. And I've literally experienced watching a team get up and walk out because you had to physically deliver a copy of the offer sheet. It's like a summons to court or something. But yeah, and then the Pistons have a day to decide, do we want to match that? But generally how restricted free agency is gone, because it's awful for players. It's the worst thing we have in the league for players is they don't even get offer sheets because teams don't want to mess around. And it turns into, let's just re-sign the guy and we'll work something out. So that's why I always say, if you don't get something done extension-wise with a rookie scale guy, you're probably okay. It's not the end of the world unless the player comes back and it's like, man, we could have given this guy, $20 million a year, and now he came out, he made All-Star, made All-NBA, and now we got to give him 40. That's where you can lose as a team, but you still have control.
So the extension numbers are like, there's no restrictions. Like if they play this out to next year, like they can still 4 for 100, 4 for 120, like all of that. Real quick, Aruna says, Greg Monroe, has anyone else taken the qualifying offer and played it out?
Yeah, Greg Monroe did that. Yeah, very famously. There's been a handful of other guys, usually smaller qualifying offers. It was, his name is escaping me right now. Jalen Horde from the Jazz a couple years ago signed a 2-way qualifying offer, and then he ended up getting cut, but he got himself some guaranteed money out of it with that. But it's pretty rare. We hear about a lot of guys threatening to do it, but the reality is everybody looks at it and says, oh, man, I can get real money. Like, I'm not like why am I going to play with this? Like, let's lock in some real money. And that's agents generally counsel players to do that as well, unless it gets really stupid. Like, hey, we'll offer you $10 million a year. Then it's like, no, I'm not, that's crazy. So, but yeah, every once in a while it happens.
All right, let's go to a short break. When we come back, we will get into your guys' questions that will drive a lot of the conversation we had planned in terms of available free agents, what those guys will make, and those different things. So we'll get into those right after this.
All right, we're back with segment 3 and we're going to go ahead and get directly into our questions here. So here's one from Michael Dampier. Welcome, Keith. Could Keith give his thoughts on challenges or not of Detroit operating as an under the cap team this upcoming season for a market like Detroit? Can they attract enough players?
Yeah, I think this is a more unique situation this summer than maybe it was like last summer. When last summer was, let's go get Tobias Harris, let's go get Malik Beasley. A lot of these guys who were like second and third tier type free agents. I think this summer, if you're going under the cap, it's with a strict plan to use that cap space to re-sign Malik Beasley. I don't think you're doing it to go recruit a player. Here's the issue. And I'm in the middle of doing free agent rankings right now on Spot Track. Point guards and shooting guards are up. Spoiler, Malik Beasley's my top ranked shooting guard. If you go into the overall, like my top 50 rankings for free agents, and I won't read them all off to you because nobody wants to hear that right now, but you take out all the guys who are likely to pick up options or just like almost a lock to re-sign where they are, Malik Beasley might be the best actual available free agent this summer, which sounds kind of crazy, but that gives you a sense of that's where we're at this summer. Now, the good news is for Detroit, it's only the Nets for cap space that you'd be competing with. It'd be non-taxpayer MLE from anybody else. In Detroit, if they go the cap space route, they can beat that. So that's why it's not as concerning and you're not as worried about the market-related questions. And I think the market will come down to, are they winning? Right? People get very caught up in, well, it's cold and it's, this and it's that. And it's not LA or Miami and all the things players want. But a lot of players, if the money is there and they're winning, I've seen a lot of guys go live cold places before because they're happy to be there for winning teams.
So talking about the market, talking about available players, let's stay under the cap. Let's just live in that world for a second. Big Dog Pistons ask, what are guys like Naz Reid and Nickeil Alexander-Walker going to command and cost this offseason?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, again, this is such a weird summer because you're just not going to have competitors for those guys unless we start getting into sign and trades and things like that. And those can be complicated because the sign is a way where it is like Naz Reid is Naz Reid has to want to go to the team, and the Timberwolves would want to have to work out a trade with that team as well. They also trigger a first apron hard cap, which can be an issue for teams. But if we take all that stuff out, I think the path with Naz Reid is going to be, I think he may actually pick up his option and then sign an extension off of that with the Timberwolves. Okay. That makes a lot of sense for him. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is somebody who pre-playoffs, he was much further down my shooting guard list than where he is now. Now I have him a lot higher because, one, it's been an entire season of really good shooting for a third year in a row. So now I'm at the point where all right, I believe he's a 40% three-point shooter. He can do a little bit with the ball in his hands, and he is obviously an outstanding perimeter defender who can really defend 1 through 3. And that's huge. That's going to be something a lot of teams are going to pay for. So don't think that the issue comes down to, can another team be what Minnesota can give him because they have his bird rights, and where's Minnesota willing to go with their own issues being super expensive? And with Alexander Walker, does it come down to, is the non-taxpayer enough for him to leave a situation in Minnesota where he's really comfortable, he has a huge role, he's very well liked in the community? That's going to be the question. Because again, I don't think the Nets are coming with cap space offers there. I'll say this. The Pistons went cap space and something went haywire and Beasley left, I'd have no problem if they said we want to throw $15 million at Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Great. Go ahead. No, not even going to get a blink out of me on that because I think he's that good.
For sure. Moving on to YouTube user, it seems like Kuminga isn't part of the Golden State Warriors' future plans. What average annual value do you think it would take for him to sign to an offer sheet? And what are the most likely assets required to send back in a sign and trade? So Kuminga, I mean, I think he's a pretty divisive player. Honestly, depending on who you ask about him. So just where do you follow Kuminga as a player? And then how would you value his fit with the Pistons specifically?
I really like Jonathan Kuminga, and I think I like him more than a lot of other people do because I think he can score. Like I think he can score, and I'm not a yay points guy, but I'm also not someone who thinks scoring doesn't matter. Like you get sometimes so deep into analytics, folks, and it's like scoring points doesn't matter. It's like last I checked, you need to score 100 points to win games, right? like it's just the reality of things. Like so how are you going to get them? You can't just put a bunch of 10-point per game scorers on the court and assume they're all going to hit for 10 to 12 and we're going to be fine. So I kind of like Jonathan Kuminga. That said, yeah, if you were to throw him an offer sheet, here's the problem. That's really only the Nets, though, right? Because otherwise, you're talking strictly a sign and trade. Because you can't do an offer sheet that turns into a sign and trade. That would be a straight sign and trade, which is fine too. It doesn't really matter. But a straight offer sheet would be the Nets, and Sean Marks did it before for a lot less players than Jonathan Kuminga, Otto Porter Jr., Alan Crabb, Tyler Johnson, all got offer sheets that all got matched. And then eventually the Nets acquired, I think, all of them anyway at some point. But I think with Kuminga, if you were Detroit, say, and you wanted to work out a sign and trade, yeah, you're probably talking anything north of 20 million. It's probably enough to get the Warriors starting to think about it a little bit, where it's like, all right, where are we going to go with this? And then when you get into the salary matching pieces, this is where you start. All right, well, what do we have available? You're probably starting with maybe you could talk them into like Tobias Harris, but you're probably more starting with guys like, all right, let's talk about Isaiah Stewart or Samani Fontecchio or those other guys, because everybody else is either on a good deal or they're a part of the core that you're probably not going to move on from.
All right, Big Dog Pistons ask about Santi Aldama. This is another player that I hear Pistons fans bring up a lot. They're kind of interested in bringing this archetype to Detroit. Restricted free agent, I believe, Keith. Yep. So I know we talked about that a little bit earlier. What do you think that's going to look like?
Yeah, I again, and this is going to come off as this guy just likes everybody. I promise there are players I'm not fans of their game. But I like Santi Aldama because I think he is a very good modern big because he can shoot, he can score, he can pass. He plays at a very high level on the international level with the Spanish national team, which I think has real value in things. So, but I'm not going to go crazy. I think probably somewhere in the range of 12 to 14 million. So most of, if not all of the non-taxpayer MLE are an amount around that. Now, the good news is if you're another team who wants him, he might be more gettable because Memphis is dealing with, we talked a little bit about Jaren Jackson Jr. and where did things go with that. And then I think the other issue is you have Desmond Bane on a near max deal. You have John Morant on a max deal. They're starting to get really expensive for kind of a smaller market team that isn't a locked in title contender. It'd be a lot easier to swallow keeping everybody. If they were Oklahoma City or Minnesota and they're in the Western Conference Finals. So that's where it's going to get a little bit trickier with that. But I like Santi Aldama quite a bit.
For sure. From Big Dog Pistons, if they don't renounce the vets, do the cap holds reduce as they agree to new deals? THC has a $24 million hold. If he agrees to $6 billion, does that give us $18 billion in space? So essentially just, I think there's a lot of confusion with how cap holds work and even like what purpose cap holds serve. So if you could even just kind of walk us through that, I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, so the idea behind a cap hold is if you go back to when the Heat signed LeBron and Chris Bosh, right? That's the example I always use with this. They still had to keep a cap hold for Dwayne Wade on the books, even though they re-signed him that summer too, because if they didn't, they would have lost his bird rights and they wouldn't have been able to do what they do. Why you put a cap hold is you don't want a team saying, we renounce, or you wouldn't even need to renounce, just everybody's a free agent, signed everybody to whatever you want. And then that's how teams would have, 150 million in cap space and they'd go hog wild signing guys. So it's basically a placeholder for whatever the next assumed salary is. Now with Hardaway, yeah, he's not getting 24 million, but it's just a math formula that says if you made this amount last year, now you make this amount next year. So that's where we're kind of at with him. So that's where, if he drops off that number, sure. Now he kind of lands in a spot where let's say he takes $6 million. It's whatever they're actually on the books for is what counts. 18 million in cap space. That's why I was kind of doing one of these and bobbing my head a little bit. Could create more cap space, but doesn't generally, because again, if we're talking about creating cap space, we're talking about renouncing everybody this summer and getting off the books. If the Pistons were, let's say they were sitting on 20 million in cap space plus Hardaway's 24 million cap hold, then if you wipe that away, yeah, you could say now we have 18 more million. We got like 38 million in cap space. But generally in this, again, this specific example, not how it's going to work.
All right, so YouTube user asks, is there a way for the Pistons to sign both Beasley and Bobby Portis? So again, talking about the same archetype of player as the Sante Aldama conversation, assuming you can fit one into the full MLE.
Yeah, probably not, because if you're using the full MLE to sign Portis, now you can't use it for Beasley, and you're talking about using his non-bird rights, and I don't think the $7.2 million that they can give him with that is going to be enough. If you're using the closer path would be go under the cap, use the cap space to sign Beasley, and then somehow convince Portis to take the room exception at $8 million. Then the challenge is now you've lost Dennis Schroeder. So that kind of that's where it kind of becomes, all right, if you want to go that way, I'm not going to argue. Maybe that is the right way to go, but it's just you're probably not keeping everybody that way.
But with that, Bobby Portis is probably like, if you had to, value him, he'll probably be more like non-taxpayer range if I had to guess, right?
Yeah, he'd have to really want to come there to do that. The other issue is too, he has a player option for $13.4 million that I think he's probably just going to pick up, because I don't know why. I don't know that unless he knows. Let's put it this way: if we see in the next month he declines that player option, that's probably because he knows he has the non-taxpayer out there for him from somebody.
And just to be clear for everybody, let's say the Pistons went the cap space route, and let's say they spent 16 of the 19 on Beasley. They can't take the extra 3 and combine it with the room exception to give somebody $11 million, right, Keith?
Correct. Yeah, that is correct.
Mr. Ray says Bobby Portis, a.k.a. Bryce's favorite player in the league. That is not true. Tamani Kamara is my favorite player in the league, and Aaron Naismith is quickly approaching that as well. We'll get to a few more here and then get you out. Omari, we're going to make you talk NBA draft, so you can read this one off and then let me and Keith cook.
Yeah, no, this is actually a good one, because I asked somebody about this the other day, and I think it's going to be more of a topic as we get closer to it, with the Pistons specifically having 37. But with the way the NIL is killing the depth of this year's draft, that round 2 show on a separate night could be tough viewing, obviously, with the second round now being the day after. Keith, just kind of project how maybe the mid to bottom range of this draft is shaping out, with a lot of French guys obviously continuing to stay eligible for college and make NIL money. How much does that affect things for the Pistons, who are probably hoping to get a guy there if they keep that pick?
Yeah, massive. So the last pick in the first round, the 30th pick, has a rookie scale amount that will vary, because most players sign for the 120% of scale of $2.7 million. Top end college guys now are getting that or more. From that mid-range, good college players are getting around that number. I think PJ Haggerty, we just withdrew from the draft, transferring to Kansas State, and I think he's getting like $2 or $3 million. So that gives you a sense. That's a first-round pick. That's $2.7 million guaranteed money. If you're a second-round pick, you're getting like $2 million in starting salary. A lot of college guys are looking at it and saying, man, if I'm going to be a second-round pick and I'm only going to bank $2 million, why? Like, I'll go back to school, I'll make $2 million, and I'll improve my draft stock, and I'll be a mid to late first round pick and get more than that next year when I'm out of eligibility, or I'll go overseas or anything. Guys who are even further down in the second round, once you hit about 45-ish and later, maybe even 40 and later, teams are drafting those guys to take two-way contracts. Guys who are taking two-way contracts, you're talking like $700 fully guaranteed. 700,000. Let me rephrase, not 700, because I'll do it for $700. A lot of these guys don't need to, but $700K fully guaranteed on a two-way deal, and work out to, if everything goes well, again about $2 million. You'll land ultimately out of that way more than that as a NIL guy. So I think that's where, if I'm one of those guys, I'm gonna stay in school and make more money in NIL. Improve. We just saw Alex Condon opt out with the Gators because it's like why not? I can return, maybe win another title, improve my draft stock, play my way into the first round next year, and off we go. So that it is going to kill it. Now, tough viewing. Yeah, I think for the casual fans, for people like Bryce and Sam and then me, like the nerds who love it, like I think we're gonna be locked in on it because it'll be like, oh, cool, this guy's here. But yeah, it's gonna be a little bit tougher than it was.
Yeah, I mean, Michigan fans were excited yesterday. Yaxel Lindenborg, who was I don't know, for some people wasn't even borderline first round. He was in the 20s for some people.
I know teams that had him in the top 20.
Yeah,
on that board.
Give it real quick. We'll get you out on these two. One, you have a couple names. I know we're literally setting on the withdrawal date for college guys, so this may not age very well. Maxime Renault is the name I always bring up for the Pistons at 37. Do you have a name or two that, let's just, as things stand right now, you think would be interesting there, top of the second round?
Yeah, if he's available at this spot, I don't think he's going to be. I think he should be drafted. But he's going to be drafted way lower than where I think he should be. Janai Broom, I'm a huge fan of his. I think he would be awesome for the Pistons because he just does a lot of things that their other bigs don't do. So he would be huge. The one that just popped up, Ryan Cockbrenner, right? Yeah, 100%. Like he'd be really good if they wanted to go that route there. So those are a couple guys that had kind of immediately come to mind with that one. I am sorry, I'm just trying to get to my big board here. I like a little bit different, I think, evaluation than some others, but like an Alex Tui could be interesting.
Sure.
You know, he's a kid, I really kind of like Adu Tiero. I like him too. There, I think he's probably going to go a little bit higher than this. It's probably a little too high to pick him, but I really like Cam Jones a lot too. I think he can do a lot of things. So Drake Powell, as the commenter just mentioned, would be a really interesting player. He's one where you're banking on what he was as a prospect coming in versus what we really saw this year. But yeah, there's definitely going to be good players available at that pick for sure.
All right, get you out on this 102.
Yeah, from M Wesley 13. What do you think will need to be the first offseason domino to fall? Giannis getting figured out, KD, or other?
All right, so we've all been doing this for a while, and it was like the worst nightmare was when LeBron was a free agent. Because like this is just going to hold up everything because he's not going to decide July 1st. He's going to wait till like July 7th or 8th. And then everybody else is going to stand around picking their nose, like waiting on him to make a decision. I think the Giannis decision could hold things up. I do think we'll have clarity by draft week on whether he wants out or not. That's the going to be the big one because that's going to change everything, right? Like that's going to be, you're going to have 29 teams saying, all right, let's, throw our best offer in there just because, like, probably not for 20 of them, it's going to not even be close, but, everybody's going to be interested. And then for KD, that's just a smaller market or a smaller number of teams, I should say, that makes it available. It's just a much more narrow market because you have to be in the right place as a franchise to acquire him. I don't think as good as KD is, I think KD is a guy who lifts you to the next level. I think Giannis is somebody who you're an immediate contender if you get him. Unless you're, the I don't know, the Wizards or so. Like you're probably a playoff team, but you're probably not a title contender. But most other teams that could get him. But yeah, it's over on Front Office Show. We've been calling it the summer of the trade because there's going to be trades galore this summer. That's going to be how the big stuff gets done. There's not good free agents. There's not a lot of cap space. So the big moves are going to come through trade, which is honestly a lot more fun because it involves more teams, more players. It gets kind of crazy. I'm very, very excited. Get used to you're probably already used to terms like apron and all those things. You're going to hear all that stuff a lot. Get used to multi-team trade this summer. And Sean Marks is sitting there with $60 million in cap space. And my running joke has been he should go stand in front of Barclays Center on the opening night of free agency, holding a big tablet that says, "Bring me your tired, you're hungry, you're poor, your bad contracts. Just send them with a draft pick, and we're happy to do business." Because that's where they're going to be sitting. They should be able to clean up this summer.
Love it. Keith, thanks so much for joining us. We didn't even get into everything I wanted to get into, but That's because we do such a good job. You do such a good job of breaking it down for us. And so we always love having you. Thank you so much. Let everybody know real quick where they can find you if they're not already listening to the podcast, if they're not already using the trade machine and everything else you got over at Spotrac. Like, go ahead and let them know so they make sure that they're taking in all of that content.
Yeah, if you like this stuff, you like free agent talk and roster construction talk and all that, Spotrac's my home for all my written work. I'm in the middle of my free agent stuff. So we've got team off-season previews going. Cool thing is I haven't written the Pistons yet because we go in order of elimination. Normally, they're one of the early ones that I write. I haven't had to this year, which has been a lot of fun. We'll get to them probably in another week-ish or so. But we're moving on those. We've also got free agent rankings by position. If you want to see why I said this is not a strong free agent class and those things, point guards and shooting guards are already up. You can pull those out. The small forwards, power forwards, and centers will come out probably by the middle of next week. We'll have all 5 out there, and then we'll update and pull guys off as they pick up options and the like. And then if you like this kind of stuff, but league wide, not so Pistons focused, NBA front office show with Trevor Lane and I, we do it right now. We're kind of in about 3 times a week mode, but we do it as often as there's a lot of news. So when we get closer to the off season, we'll probably get back to doing daily shows. Then every Friday is a live show just like this, where we pull comments from the chat. It's really the listeners' show to ask us whatever they wanted. Sometimes we get a little off the rails and get a little crazy. We call it Front Office Friday, and we have a lot of fun with those shows. So happy to have you join us over there as well.
For sure, Keith. Always a huge pleasure to have us on. Always a huge pleasure to have you on. This is the end of the pod, long Memorial Day weekend. But again, thank you so much. Support Keith Smith, support Spotrac. He does a lot of great work over there. And with that, I will close this out. So big thanks to our audio producer, Robin Chan, our editor-in-chief, Dakota Avery Nichols, and big thanks to Will Davenport, as always. And we'll talk to you all next week.